So today we're going to be taking a look at the newest release from Nodus. And for those of you that don't know, Nodus is an LA-based micro brand, and they were founded maybe 2-3 years ago. And they just started off with dive watches, as most companies do. They basically made a fairly modest-sized dive watch with cool colors, and the build quality was pretty good, so people liked it. And they just created upping their game, upping their design, and now we're on to the Sector series, which is supposedly supposed to branch out into other watches like dress watches and things like that. So excited to see what it evolves into. But what I have here is the Sector Dive. Now let's get into it. We have a diameter of what seems to be about 38.8. Without the bezel, we're going to get around 37.5. We have a lug to lug about 47. We have a height of 12.9 with a 20 millimeter lug width. So this retails $425 new from the Nodus website. Comes with a screw down crown, 150 meters of water resistant, Seiko NH35 movement, which, you know, they regulate it in a couple of different positions, so it's accurate to around plus or minus 10 seconds a day once they're done with it. Domed sapphire crystal with blue inner AR coating. And that's about all for the watch. So looking at the dial here, it is called the Nodus Sector, so it is somewhat of a sector dial. We have a raised central portion here, as you can see, which holds the hand stack, the logo, and the designation of the model name. It's pretty balanced. You know, there's two things at the top, two things at the bottom. Very nice there. Then we have this outer blacked portion that holds all of the hour indices. It also has the date window. And then we have a third and last sector on the very end, which is done in all white, as a little contrast, and has the minutes track printed. So the dial is very clean overall. We have this 369 dial, black and white theme that's predominant, as well as, you know, the hints of green on the edge of the seconds hand, the hour hand completely, and in that sector text. It's all nice because all the greens pretty much seem to match exactly, and it's just a nice hint. I mean, I like green personally, so it's fine for me. No applied elements to the dial, but for the price, I think it's well done, well thought out. The date window, while I didn't think I was going to like it too much, it still isn't that obtrusive. Probably based off the size of it, as well as the date window actually being printed in black, which is nice because not a lot of companies match the date window. If this date window would have been white, then I definitely wouldn't have liked it, but it blends in more to the dial once you have it, you know, further away from the wrist. So looking on this dial on a macro level, if we just turn the watch a little bit, and sorry for the glare, we can see that there's this slight texturing to the very central portion of the dial that's not really found on any other portion. You can see there's kind of like a slight metallic texturing on the very edge, white sector at the very end, the white ring. But overall, it's a cool little detail that doesn't really come to life from off the wrist too much. We see that all the printing is done really well, no misprinting, not really any fuzziness around the markers or the printing in the the painting of the markers. We can see there in the green hand little imperfections, that little tiny pip on the end of the green or in the middle of the green, but definitely not noticeable from the wrist. It's nice to go with colored or treated hands, whatever the technical term would be, at this price point, because obviously they can't really hand finish the components, make them perfect. So it allows any imperfections not only to be hid, but also just to add nice continuity to the coloration. You can see the lume is applied really nicely, no spotting, no missed parts in the lume. Date window cut out really nicely, and the date disc matching the dial very nicely. I like the slight amount of depth that's added with this dial. You obviously have the cutout that falls into the dial, but you also have the raising of the inner portion here. We just kind of get it at a weird angle here. We can see that outer track done in white is also raised from the dial. So it's these types of, you know, dimensionality that adds to the overall effect of the watch that you don't notice. Flat dial watches sometimes come across as, you know, too flat, a little boring. So overall, it's just nice that they're able to find ways to add a little depth to the watch. So we're taking a look at the case here. We have these very nice pointed lugs that look like they're really pointing inwards towards the case. They really remind me of Carrera lugs. Both on the outside and the inside of the lug, we have polishing, but we have this brush section here, which is done in a concentric brushing pattern. And it's nice because it kind of acts to slim the lug. Visually, it makes the lugs look really, really small, but it really adds a hint of flare when the light reflects and catches off those polished surfaces. You can see the mid case looks fairly thin. The lugs reach seemingly below the case back, so it allows it to wear really nicely on the wrist. Got nice horizontal brushing along the sides here. Drilled lug holes, so strap changing becomes really, really easy. You see we got this nice double row of knurling along the crown to give it a good grip. The black graduations in the bezel, which aren't the best in their functionality, but you know, could be worse, as in there not being any graduations. You got this really, really nice knurling on the crown. It is like immensely grippy, if that is even a correct terminology. But super nice action on the crown there. We can see we have this completely brushed H-style bracelet. Very, very fluid. I really like this bracelet. The links, I think, are a good size. The overall design and just look of the bracelet, I think, is really nice. I think it does work well with the watch. It may have been nice to see some polished elements on here just to mirror the fact that there's a polishing and brushing in the case. But again, still really do like the watch. When we get to the clasp, we have it signed Nodus. Here we do have a little bit of polishing along the edges. We got a double push button deployant clasp. As you can see here, we got 3 holes of micro adjustment, which I find is a pretty decent number. 3 or 4, 5 maybe a little bit overkill, but I think 4 is almost the best amount, but 3 is definitely better than 0. So nice to see micro adjustment there. You can actually see we have screwed end links, which for a sub $500 watch is pretty awesome to see screwed end links. They went with a female style end link, which is really nice because it allows the case to wear just very close, immediately push down onto the wrist, immediately drape over the wrist so that it doesn't extend out any further. Really makes it very comfortable. One thing I will note is I feel like the clasp is a little large, but very minor thing to nitpick on. Overall, really cool case. I really like the polishing that they did on the sides here. They definitely could have just went with an all brush look, but they really did add some dimensionality to it. There's a angularity to the lugs that are really nice, and I think it does shine from the wrist. So speaking of that, let's put this on the wrist. Earlier I was wearing my Zodiac Seawolf, and here we have the Nodus sitting on my 6.5 inch wrist. Now this is a mid-sized diver, and thank you for that, because it's hard to find divers even nowadays at 40 millimeters really, and to see one that's like 38ish millimeters is really refreshing, really nice. The way it fits on the wrist, the overall proportionality of it, the people with smaller wrists like me, it just looks really nice, I think. It's super comfortable. The bracelet is very articulate. Again, the links are very fine, so it fits on the wrist very nicely. One thing I think you have to wait to appreciate on the wrist is kind of the back and forth of the color play between the black and the white. You obviously have the black main middle section here, followed by the white outer section, followed by another blackness represented in the bezel. So it's just a kind of nice sandwich of color, I guess you can say, that I think does look really good. I'm not a huge fan of the blacked out bezel. I think maybe a stainless steel bezel would have worked better, or no bezel at all. But I mean, then again, it is like a dive type watch. As you can see right there, the Nodus really does conform to the wrist pretty well. It is a taller watch, but it sits well, it conforms to the wrist well, and I think it wears its size well. If you have anywhere between a 6.5, 7 inch wrist, or really 7 inch wrist and below, I think this watch is going to wear amazingly on you. 7 to 7.5 inch wrist, as long as you're okay with a smaller sized watch, it'll still wear fine. Above a 7.5 inch wrist, then maybe you might have to start looking other places, but I mean, it's a really cool watch. Taking a look at the lume here, we see it's pretty well applied. Pretty much all elements on this watch are lumed, from the hands to the triangular mark at the very end of the seconds hand, so you can pretty much tell exact time in the dark. If you really wanted, I guess you can even time something in the dark. I mean, I don't know why you'd want to, but because of that lumed bezel pip, you can. If I bring it into the next to the Snoopy here, you can see that the Snoopy is brighter. I mean, obviously one's Indiglow, one is, I believe, Super Luminova. If that's wrong, I'll correct it, but Nodus did a pretty good job. The lume holds its brightness for a fair amount of time. So pros and cons of this watch. One pro I definitely would say is size. Now, you don't see a lot of sub 40 millimeter divers. I mean, you have Christopher Ward, which is, you know, more towards the $800 to $1,000 range. So at this price point, it's refreshing to see. You have a cool design, which none of my other people have. I dig the sector style of it. I like the concentric circles. I like the hints of color in it. The hints are really tasteful. You know, it's not overly colorful. The green that they use, I mean, I like green. Green's my favorite color. I'm wearing a green shirt. So the green that they used was used tastefully. It was only in the seconds hand, only on the tip of the seconds hand, the hour hand, and in the sector lettering. And they have similar tasteful color additions in all of their dive watch models for the sector series. That was hard to get out, but it is a really well-built watch. The bracelet's a really good part of the watch, I think. The H-Link style is really comfortable. The overall feel and quality of the bracelet is really nice. The fact that you get screwed links at this price point is really, really cool. So moving on to the cons, I think one of the biggest ones for me is probably just the bezel. I understand how the black bezel fits into the watch's style, if that makes sense. The black tone of the bezel matches with the overall watch tone, but it's just not something I love about it. I mean, I would have preferred maybe a steel bezel, as I said earlier, or just, I guess, no bezel at all, but they have that in their sector field range, so you can always go for one of those. But I think it's cool, it's different. I guess just not used to the black style bezel because not many companies use them. So it throws you off at first, it definitely does, but it does make sense in the watch's design over time. Another thing I don't love overly about the watch is the date at 4:30. Now, when I first ordered the watch, I thought I was going to hate the date. And over owning it for a couple weeks, wearing it more and more, that feeling went away because of the way they integrated the date with the matching date wheel, with the circular cutout. It's not overly obtrusive, it's not overly large. So although the date isn't as I would have preferred it, and I probably would have even preferred a no date, it is integrated in a way that's not overly in your face, and it's livable. Overall, it's a great watch, great quality. I love the lugs, I love the size. I mean, you get a sapphire crystal, Seiko NH35, so you really can't go wrong. I mean, if you're looking at for a good watch under $500 and you're tired of, you know, looking at SKXs and Orients and maybe some used Hamiltons, other micro brands, the Richard Legrand, something like that, Spinnaker, I think Nodus is a cool brand to look at. They offer really good value. They offer cool case designs, they great customer service. There's, you know, the owners are great guys, and, you know, it's a great watch. And if you don't like the things like the bezel and the date, which I didn't like, they have the Nodus Sector Field range, which is more of a traditional like Hamilton khaki style watch, which is less of a diver, without the bezel, more plain circular bezel. So it makes something for everyone. And yeah, it's a great watch. Hope you like the review. See you in another one.